Welcome back. All right, so news of the day from around the hockey world, and we'll see whether or not there needs to be another one of these videos tonight before the games get started. Gostis Bear has cleared waivers, so he is free to join the taxi squad, or it makes him easier to trade, one or the other, right? Because then the team picking him up doesn't need to waive him to put him on the taxi squad themselves, in case they have a lot of defensemen and they just want to have him there as a spare. Think like what Montreal did picking up Corey Perry when the season started. He wasn't in the regular lineup. He was there as the extra, and then he worked his way in. And Ghost, it might end up being a similar thing. But again, this just right now means Philadelphia can put him on the taxi squad and get that cap relief. Because word has it they're in the market for a goaltender. This was supposed to be the year where we didn't have this discussion about Philadelphia, where they had Elliott, they had Hart, which was a good tandem last year, and their goaltending was finally fixed after decades. And now we're back. So there you go. They should also be in the market for some kind of a change to their blue line. Waving Ghost is one thing, but that blue line, it's just been very dysfunctional this year. It doesn't help your goaltenders when your defensemen are not playing well in front of them. Adam Gaudette, as I mentioned in the preview this morning, he's tested positive. That was revealed by the team yesterday. And on a case-by-case basis, in some instances, we're finding out a player has tested positive or that they're just in protocols. But in this case, he did test positive, and right now the game is a go. As far as I can tell, they've had guys on the ice. They're still skating around. They're still working on it. They're still working on testing. Odds are, I think the game probably does go forward. We don't know if it's a false positive either, right? So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I know they have to do the second test on the first that drew the positive result, and if it tests negative the second time, then right. So, anyways, yeah, that's what's going on right now with the Canucks. I don't have any idea. But again, as I mentioned in the preview, if they do decide, well, we're going to shut these guys down for 10 days like they just did with Montreal, I don't know how you get 56 games in without extending the Canucks season into like mid-May. And so that might finally be the straw that breaks camel's back, and as the NHL saying, well, we're not going to make up all the games. And then it's a matter of which ones do you take out. Which opponents do you take out of that rotation now? And that's where things are going to get really, really interesting. For Florida fans, there's some good news and bad news. The bad news first is that Duclair's out 7 to 10 days with it's a shoulder injury. They're calling it upper body, but you can see the trainer out on the ice is grabbing at the shoulder. It's a shoulder injury, but apparently it's not that bad. So it's a week to 10 days. The good news part of it is both Barkov and Hornqvist should be back this weekend. It sounds like both of them are on track to be back this weekend, and so that definitely will help. There's word that Bill Zito's looking to get help on the defense, while Ekblad's going to be out for the rest of the regular season. But there's only so much you can do. You can't find an Aaron Ekblad on the trade market right now. So odds are it'll be somebody to beef things up a little bit on the back end and add that depth. But it's not going to be somebody who can replace what Ekblad was doing. This is where Keith Yandel can step up, get a few goals. This is where Mackenzie Weegar can step up and get a couple as well. He's shown he has the offensive instincts recently. And we'll see how things go with the Panthers from here. Ekblad was having a great season, but I do still believe this team can be a threat without him in the lineup. Of course, the big news coming out of last night's games, and again, when there's a 4-0 game going on in one area, and then you've got the Rangers coming back from 2-0 down against the Capitals. That was the game I was paying more attention to. I didn't see the McDavid elbow on Kotkaniemi, and when I saw it, I thought, well, that's late and that's high. I was surprised it wasn't 5 in a game, to be honest. But the NHL, the player safety department's fined him $5,000, which I'm okay with. I mean, again, could he have been suspended for a game or two? Maybe. But yeah. And again, this is it brings up that whole conversation about how McDavid takes all that abuse all game long, and this is just what happens. And I don't know. I don't like that argument, because I've watched players on teams I've cheered for get beat up for years and never throw an elbow like that. So, McDavid is definitely a player of strong emotion. And again, I've mentioned this before. The good news is if you have a player who's flipping out like that, that's normally in a situation where they're losing the game. So if you're against that player's team, that means you've got to him and you've probably beaten his team. Out of Minnesota, Matt Boldy has signed his entry-level contract. Watch for a lot of NCAA players to be signing over the next week or so. And especially over the next couple of days, I would think, as we get into the Frozen Four and all that stuff with the NCAA. And Boldy signing an entry-level contract adds another wrinkle for the Minnesota Wild. And we'll see whether or not he gets some games before the season's over with the Minnesota Wild, or if he stays in the AHL. I don't think he'll stay the whole rest of the season in the AHL. I think they'll give him a look. A lot of these guys that sign under the NCAA, it's going to be tough for teams not to give them a look. So, because they're not 18 years of age when they're stepping in. So, odds are they're a little more physically ready than the teenagers are. So, be interesting to see where he slots into the lineup for Minnesota when he gets there. Freddie Anderson. So this is interesting. He's been out since March 19th, right? And it was day-to-day. And they played it off like, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. He's not in there right now. He's not in the lineup right now. But now he's got an appointment today related to this lower body injury that's had him out for 2 weeks. And he's not traveling with the team. So I honestly think this is probably worse than what they're telling us. And I think that it's going to keep him out for a while. And I've always found that odd and I'm not sure if they do this for, I don't know, do you do that because there's opposing teams that you're not letting them know how long a player is going to be out? Do you do that so that fans don't, do what fans do these days? Why don't you acknowledge up front, or did they not know? So it'll be interesting to see when it comes out what's going on here. Whether or not the team knew at the time that he went out of the lineup, March 19th, that he wasn't going to be back for weeks. And it is one of those things I'm curious about. As to where that line is between them saying, all right, we're going to tell the truth. Because, again, there are teams that definitely don't tell you everything. And they don't have to tell us everything. But it's a matter of, is it so the media doesn't know, so other teams don't know, so the fans don't know, so their teammates don't know. You'd think their teammates would know. They talk to each other, right? That'd be even weirder. No texting Freddie Anderson. Why? That's so random and weird. So, we'll see how long he's out. Jason Robertson. So, Dallas has had problems with scoring. Jason Robertson is not. Over his last 5 games, he has 3 goals and 2 assists. And I haven't talked him up much because, I've been waiting to see if he'll be able to maintain that. 7 goals, 15 assists, 22 points. And again, as a Dallas fan, I've obviously been very impressed with this 21-year-old kid stepping in so far and looking pretty much like a veteran. And it's interesting because there wasn't that much hype about Robertson before he came in. Like he was seen as a good prospect, but you never know until they play at the NHL level. He's been very, very good. And he's got himself into the Calder conversation because with those 22 points, he's second on the list. Now, I would still have him behind Lankinen. I would still have him behind Kaprizov in terms of Calder. And maybe Stützle as well. But he's definitely in that conversation now. And it's been interesting to watch because Dallas is a team that struggles with scoring. Robertson doesn't. And it's almost like what Kaprizov's done for Minnesota. Except that Minnesota last year was really, really tough to watch. Dallas wasn't that tough to watch. They just couldn't score. So we'll see whether or not Robertson can keep that up. If he can keep scoring at a point-a-game pace, and especially if it's 3 goals for 5 games, regularly, he'll get some votes. I don't think he'll end up being a Calder favorite, just because I think Kaprizov is still seen as the best one in the class. But, this is where people would say, well, Robertson's younger than Kaprizov. All right, sure. It doesn't necessarily, to me, make one player more impressive than the other, but I understand the argument. But so Robertson's had a very good run with Dallas. We'll see whether or not he keeps that up. Nashville came out and announced today So Forsberg's missed the last couple of games, but now they've made it official that it's week to week with an upper body injury. Week to week usually means at least 2, a minimum of 2. Because if it's a week, then they'd say 7 to 10 days. So this is at least 2 weeks, you would think, for Forsberg. And that doesn't seem to have hurt them yet. They're on a 6-game winning streak in Nashville. So, kudos to Nashville for their ability to put together what's been a really, really strong run with a roster that most, myself included, had kind of given up on. So kudos to them. Very nice. So I'm not going to rule them out, even though Forsberg's out for weeks to come. This just, to me, says that Poile might be looking to add at the deadline. So everybody's expecting him to rent. It's possible that the renting is going to be coming in rather than going out. So it'll be interesting to see what they do at the deadline. Because if they're expecting him to miss right through the trade deadline, it might be tempting to make a move now. Get somebody in the lineup. And again, it might be a depth forward. And it's all going to depend on cap. It's all going to depend on budgets and all that. But I would not be surprised if Nashville adds, depending on how long he's going to be out. This is interesting, too. Pierre LeBrun's reporting that Ron Francis is already getting calls. And basically, they're from GMs going, okay, so if I make a trade and I pick up this guy, what will it take to convince you not to take him in the expansion draft? And the answer from Francis has been a first-round draft pick and a prospect. So it's a hefty price that Ron Francis is setting for teams to get him to pass on certain players. And that is going to be just the worst. Now, keep in mind, before the trade deadline in 2017, Jim Rutherford had already made an agreement with George McPhee that they were going to take Marc-Andre Fleury. Marc-Andre Fleury knew he was going to Vegas when they won that Stanley Cup in 2017. That was all known. So it'll be interesting to see if anything like that is worked out before this deadline. We won't know until the expansion draft, of course. But because at that point it's tampering, right? But they can have an oral agreement. But if they don't, they just don't. Francis doesn't have to play like that. Francis can just say, "Oh, I'm going to create the best team I can." And if Francis does that, it changes everything. It does mean he's not going to be picking up first-round draft picks like Vegas did. But if he's playing hardball like that, it may mean Seattle gets a pretty darn good team right out of the gate. So, and yeah, that is one of my many Seattle magnets. I've made a bunch of Seattle magnets already. I'm ready for them next year. I'm all ready. I'm all ready for it. And they are already playing a role in how teams handle the deadline and in whether they pick somebody up or not. There may already be trades where a team has gone, we could pick that guy up, but if we pick him up, then we're going to lose this guy to Seattle. And so we can't do it. So that's already part of the conversation, and that's already taking place. And it'll be interesting to see what happens between now and July when Seattle officially puts their team together and says, here we are. And then everybody can say, that team sucks, they'll never win a game. And then 6 months later, claim the entire thing was rigged so Seattle would have a really good team. Because that's what we went through with Vegas. So it's always funny how that works out. Because, yeah, when Vegas made their team, everybody, myself included, looked at it and went, all right, okay, they got a couple guys here that can score, and they've got Fleury and net, but what else do they have? And then, yeah, they went on a great run, and everybody said this league just totally gave them all the good players. Why didn't anybody say that during the expansion draft? So, yeah, we'll see what Seattle does. They're going to keep things interesting between now and July. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happen upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.